Today on the podcast, we have our monthly news and analysis episode. There are 3 stories. First, we'll look at the company overall and how current financial plans seem to set up a timeline for large investments in the American parks. Second, we'll look at problems for Marvel, a set of new issues so serious that some executives there are considering a complete plot remake for the next batch of Marvel films and series. And last, we'll walk through the Disney Resort in California and explore some recent changes there and discuss some new options you might enjoy on your next visit. We've got a lot to cover. We've got some complex ideas to move through. We've got predictions based on recent revelations about where Disney is headed and when. So if you're all set, we're just going to jump in today and get into it. Let's go. Let's begin with this. The big news for this month is the end of the actors' strike, which now brings everyone back to work in Hollywood. Some of my friends who are SAG members believed that the strike would continue through the holidays. For months, SAG members have walked with their black and white picket signs on the sidewalk that encircles the Disney studio in Burbank. The Disney studio is sited on 2 sides by residential houses, on one side by a freeway, and on that last side by businesses and a hospital. Unlike some other studios, there's a public sidewalk that completely circles the studio, which made the Disney studio a popular place for picketers. So for my friends there, the early end of the strike with a new 3-year contract was a very pleasant surprise. They can put down their picket signs and focus on better times ahead. But the strike has set up an unusual situation for film and TV series for the upcoming year. Disney, like all studios, has been pushing back release dates. There's a range of reasons, including script rewrites and limited resources for special effects. Disney wants to avoid the type of bad press it received earlier this year when Quantumania went out to theaters with some effect sequences and soft focus, and also for some of those episodes of She-Hulk when finished effect sequences were swapped in after the episodes premiered. But one of the largest reasons for pushing back this new round of release dates remains the strike. The recent release date reshuffling has moved Deadpool 3 from May 3, 2024 back to July 26th. This leaves Disney without a tentpole film from Disney, Marvel, and Lucasfilm to begin the summer, which for major studios is a significant problem. It's also a problem for theater chains who will find very little blockbuster content in winter and spring of this coming year. Beyond Deadpool 3, Captain America Brave New World is being bumped all the way out to February 14th, 2025. Likewise, The Thunderbolts is being shifted from December 20th, 2024 down to July 25th, 2025. Outside of Marvel, Disney's Mufasa, a film set in the world of The Lion King, is being reslotted from July 5th, 2024 to December 20th. As mentioned, the majority of these delays are related to the 118-day actors' strike and the 148-day writers' strike. Because of this, Disney has no tentpole releases from November 22nd with Wish, all the way up to May 24th with Pixar's Inside Out. Lucasfilm has no releases for the entire year, and Marvel has a large break in theaters from the Marvels released on November 10th to Deadpool 3 next July. I should point out that Disney, through Fox, will have a Planet of the Apes sequel released on May 24th, but all of this spells trouble for theater chains, which, after the pandemic, have been on financial life support. 3 years ago, AMC stock was selling for $221. It now sells for $8. The high point of $221, I should mention, was partially arrived at through a short squeeze, but even without that, the stock has had a downward trajectory. Since summer of 2022, the stock has moved from $95 down to $8. The result of the work stoppage in Hollywood means that theater chains like AMC will have more difficult months ahead in terms of content. So on the one hand, after Christmas, theater owners won't see much on the horizon coming to their screens. And on the other hand, they're continually watching customers leave the Cineplex and refocus their watching habits on the living room sofa. The strike isn't only affecting theatrical releases, though. It will also have an effect on Disney+, probably to the point where the streamer will see some subscribers leave for a while until the service has new content that interests them. The service will have Marvel's Echo in January, a spin-off that presents characters first introduced in the MCU in the Hawkeye miniseries. Disney Plus should also have one live-action Star Wars series, though Star Wars Skeleton Crew, a story that takes place after the Return of the Jedi, has no official premiere date. A filing with the United States Copyright Office suggests that Disney still plans to premiere this series in January 2024. But after those series arrive in January, just as with theaters, there will be about a 5 or 6 month gap before another wave of high-interest miniseries targeted at adults shows up on the streamer. Some shows with previous release timelines, such as Daredevil Born Again, are now simply listed as TBA. Despite these release reshuffles, Disney still sees streaming as one of, if not the center point of its release strategy moving forward. On November 1st, Disney announced that it would buy, as most analysts expected it would, the remaining 1/3 shares of Hulu from NBC Universal for at least $8.6 billion. The price could actually be slightly higher based on value assessments not yet completed. The streamer began 15 years ago as a joint partnership between Disney, NBC Universal, Fox, and Time Warner. But over time, with Time Warner leaving and Disney buying Fox, control of the streamer went largely to Disney. Now Disney will outright own it. This purchase fits into Iger's vision of Disney's future, which for him is far more centered on streaming than on linear networks, cable, or even theatrical. Ownership of Hulu allows Disney to keep its strategy of bundling streaming services into a package. Right now, customers can subscribe to Disney Plus and Hulu at a discount, or they can triple up and add ESPN as well. This strategy of bundling tends to keep customers longer and reduces churn. For example, if a customer is dissatisfied with the lack of new content on Disney Plus early in 2024, they might choose to keep their bundle as it includes ESPN, which will have new sports programming early in the year. So the new content on ESPN can protect Disney Plus during a period when Disney Plus has few new series. To put it directly, a customer typically needs to be dissatisfied with all streamers in the bundle before they unsubscribe. And this bundling strategy creates a huge advantage for Disney over the other standalone studio streamers such as Paramount Plus and NBC's Peacock. And outright ownership of Hulu allows CEO Bob Iger to refocus the discussion about Disney. Basically, Iger is trying to move beyond cleaning up messes from the Chapek era to a period where he can expand the company in new directions. The recent earnings report released this past Wednesday is still mixed. Disney Plus is losing money. Disney Theatrical had a terrible summer. Attendance at Disney World is down, Disney World hotel occupancy is down, and Disney's linear networks such as ABC are losing viewers month after month as the audience moves to streaming, which means a lower ad revenue for Disney. But still, the company has bright spots: Disneyland, the cruise line, and even the streamer from a certain perspective, which Iger sees as the future of the company. Disney Plus right now is losing far less money than it did a year ago. At the height of its problems, Disney Plus lost $1.4 billion in a single quarter, which led to Chapek's firing. Disney Plus is still losing money, but its quarterly losses are now down to $420 million for the current quarter. For clarity, that last figure, $420 million is still a huge sum, and also the figure itself may be a little misleading. One reason Disney Plus is losing less money is because production has stopped on many shows due to the strikes. So money is still coming in from subscribers, but less is going out for new content, which artificially minimizes losses. The good news is this. The number of Disney Plus subscribers is continuing to increase. The service added around 7 million new subscribers in the fourth quarter, more than Wall Street expected, bringing the total number of subscribers to just over 150 million. These elements move Disney in what appears to be the right direction. Disney's plan always was to run Disney Plus at a loss during its early years. Under Chapek, these losses were larger than expected, but the goal was to build a substantial subscriber base. Iger is now reaching that goal, even if it came at a substantial cost. In terms of building the company, over the next 4 years, Iger specifically pointed to 4 areas. First, streaming. Second, more fully shifting the emphasis of ESPN from a cable service into a digital sports platform. Third, improving the quality of theatrical films so as not to repeat the summer of 2023. And fourth, here I will quote, turbocharging growth in our parks and experiences business. And it's that last item that I want to spend some time on. The shift in identity of the Disney company from the start of 2020 to the end of 2023 is a general refocusing of its emphasis centers. In 2020, Iger believed that streaming would quickly become the center of the company. This has partially happened, but Disney, like every other studio, hasn't yet figured out how streaming can produce a profit, let alone the type of profit it used to see from theatrical releases. In short, studios have lost tremendous profits that they used to see from the box office and are now hoping that they'll be able to recover the loss with streaming, which has yet to materialize. Between 2020 and 2023, what is clear in retrospect is that Disney parks, which are long-term profit centers for the company, subsidized the faltering streaming service with billions of dollars. The billions lost by Disney Plus under Chapek were replaced by billions earned by the park, particularly billions generated by the Genie Plus service. The recent earnings report solidifies these concepts with numbers. Comparing Disney's fourth quarter revenues in 2022 to 2023, the entertainment segment, which is films, TV, and streaming, was up by only 2%. The sports segment, which means ESPN, was up by 0%. But the experiences segment, which largely means resorts and the cruise line, was up by 13%, even while attendance at Disney World sagged over the summer. With this reorganization of emphasis areas, Disney is now acknowledging that the resorts are a perennial center of revenue and may be more valuable to the future of the company than streaming. To put this simply, a $1 billion capital investment in Disney Plus content might move the company toward lower losses on streaming, or at best, to a point where streaming doesn't lose money by the end of 2024, but a $1 billion capital investment in the parks produces a sizable profit. Specifically, Iger has mentioned elsewhere that investments in the Disney-owned American parks tend to produce a 100% profit, realized through ticket sales, hotel occupancy, parking, restaurant revenue, and the sale of souvenirs. That is, the hope of quickly realizing profits through the Disney Plus streaming model has been stymied by the marketplace, in which there are many streaming services that offer subscriptions at low rates, which has the effect of keeping rates relatively low on industry leaders such as Disney Plus and Netflix. But elsewhere in the Disney empire, in terms of highly themed, high-quality parks and resorts, Disney has very little meaningful competition outside of Universal Orlando, which allows them far more flexibility in creating pricing structures that produce meaningful profits. Recent statements by Iger suggest that he is simply repositioning the company around this reality. Iger has already announced plans to expand the existing parks rather than to build new resorts by doubling the company's level of ongoing investment in them. In September, Chairman of Disney Parks, Experiences and Products, Josh D'Amaro, explained that Disney has over 1,000 acres for future development at its existing resorts. He said 1,000 acres was the equivalent of 7 Disney parks. But that, of course, depends on which park you're using as your yardstick. You could actually build 13 DCAs at 1,000 acres, but you could only fit 3 Epcots in there. Despite the hyperbole, 1,000 acres of theme park expansion culled from various sites is a tremendous amount of land. So hopefully, this level of expansion does move forward over the next decade with projects like the expanded Animal Kingdom in Florida and the new theme park areas and a Disney Springs type development in California. But for Disney, all of this is interconnected: theatrical, streaming, and the parks. For the company to get to the point where it can invest heavily in the resorts, it first needs to shore up streaming and perhaps to a lesser extent linear. As I mentioned, profits from the parks are in part shoring up Disney+. To get to the point where Disney has available cash flow to make large investments in the parks, Disney+ needs to be cost neutral, so the profits from the parks can be reinvested back into the parks and not be used to balance the Disney+ spreadsheet. And for dreamers, there's even this far-out scenario. At some point, Disney Plus may actually produce a profit, which allows Disney to invest even more money into other areas of the company, such as the parks. But that vision honestly is only for true dreamers. Iger has repeatedly pointed to the end of 2024 as the point where he believes Disney Plus will produce a profit. I'm a little more skeptical about this timeline. Maybe that date is actually 2025 or even 2026. In their earnings call, it was clear that Disney was aware of this trade-off. For the next year, or maybe 2 or 3 years, Disney will need to use some available cash to backfill losses on the streamer. But the point where Disney Plus is self-sufficient or even producing a profit will mean that Disney can then invest more lavishly in the American parks, which, unlike most overseas parks, are wholly owned by Disney. At that point, we will hopefully see large expansions for Disneyland and Disney World, likely with tens of billions of dollars being reinvested each year in the second half of the 2020s to bring the parks back to a level where they are mostly unrivaled in the States. Or think of this as cycles. We're presently in the cycle where Disney's available cash is focused on getting the streamer up and going, but Iger is also now defining a subsequent cycle to begin in a few years, where once Disney Plus no longer needs cash to fill losses, Disney will redirect available cash toward the parks, as Iger put it, turbocharging their development. But the point where large capital infusions in the parks is a possibility is still a couple or perhaps a few years away. In terms of future large improvements to the parks, this, I think, is the real target. As Disney still carries substantial debt from the Fox acquisition, the company likely needs to grow Disney Plus to the point where it's no longer a financial drain. It may also sell some of its linear services and ESPN, which are other trouble spots, and it will almost certainly sell off the underperforming Hotstar streamer for India, all of which will increase cash flow, which then can be used on parks as well as on theatrical, the cruise line, other entertainment projects, and to pay back that Fox debt. That is, large investments for the parks most likely won't be made in 2024 or 2025, but sometime after the financial issues of Disney Plus are solved. Based on the financial movements here, I'd guess, assuming all goes well, we'll start to see work on large expansions in the parks beginning around 2026 and continuing through 2030. And the vision that the company is presently promoting, as I mentioned, is an expanded Animal Kingdom an expanded Magic Kingdom, and land expansions to the existing California parks. And all of that highlights another problem swirling in the mix. Starting in 2025 in Florida, Universal's Epic Universe will be the most dazzling experience in town for the next 2 or 3 years before Disney can hit back. This will surely mean another round of hotel and ticket discounts to fill those rooms and also to fill the parks. But even in this financial report, you can see the path being laid out for Disney to finally hit back against Universal's expansion in Orlando. Only that punch won't arrive until a few years after Epic Universe is open. And to bring this segment to a close, let's now focus on the next few months, on those good things that are about to premiere in the parks. In Florida, the Luminous Fireworks Show over at Epcot will premiere in December, and at Disneyland there's the Adventureland Treehouse, which opens today, November 10th, which is the day that I'm recording this. Both are modest additions to the parks and won't drive tourism, except for small pockets of deeply devoted fans, but they will enhance the experience of visiting the parks for everyone. And in theaters later this month is a new animated feature, Wish. Wish has strong buzz and good early reviews, which are largely leaked summaries online. These are positive signs for the film, but I should point out that Disney attempted to start its theatrical rebound with Haunted Mansion earlier this summer, which ultimately went nowhere. Personally, I think Haunted Mansion is a better film than the reviews or the box office suggests. I should point out that these early review snippets for Wish, which are often posted to Twitter or what is now called X, are released before full reviews are published. And as such, they usually focus on positive elements in the film without any negative criticism. So far, these snippets have been extremely positive, but you never know exactly how an actual audience will respond to a film until it's out. And we won't know for sure how this film will fare for a couple more weeks, though the signs right now all look really good. And to close up this segment, I'd like to say that we're now at a positive crossroads, where Iger is focused on expanding the company, not merely fixing the problems left by Chapek, and where writers and actors will soon be back to work creating films and shows to engage all of us in the months ahead. And now let's jump into this. The problems over at Marvel Studios have been growing. One problem at the moment is that its very expensive action-centered films haven't been performing nearly as well as they did pre-pandemic. Case in point, The Marvels. The Marvels, which was just released on November 10th, is the shortest film in the MCU. It's the continuation of the stories of Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, and Photon, a trio of superheroes, 2 of whom are tied to Disney Plus limited series. Though early in-house screenings were well received, an advanced screening in Texas offered the film middling reviews. This test screening took place back in June, which also would have allowed Marvel to revise the film before its official premiere. But the reviews that have come out in the last couple of days are mixed at best, with some of the positive reviewers supporting the film, often with reservations, and others pointing out that its comedic efforts are out of step with the underlying tones of the MCU. According to Forbes, the film cost $270 million, which is just $30 million less than Infinity War, which, if true, would make The Marvels the 4th most expensive film in the MCU. But the film also received a sizable tax subsidy from the UK government because it was shot just outside of London. This brought Disney's actual cost for the film in at around $220 million after that reported $50 million tax rebate. Still, that is a sizable sum. And because of that, the film needs to take in just under $500 million at the box office to turn a small profit. The film in early tracking, though, which is projected to receive only $50 million to $60 million in its opening weekend, is far below the figures it needs to reach to put the film on a path that should lead to financial success. More significantly, on the Disney fourth quarter earnings call, which happened just before the release of The Marvels, CEO Bob Iger discussed the turnaround in Disney theatrical would begin with the animated feature Wish, which suggested, through its absence, that the company was aware that The Marvels was unlikely to meet financial expectations. As far as I can tell, there are 4 significant problems beneath this. First, the film focuses on 2 superheroes, Miss Marvel and Photon, with whom the general public is not overly familiar. Brie Larson's character of Captain Marvel is, on the other hand, easily recognizable, but she's only 1/3 of the central cast. Second, in working to expand the narrative range of the MCU with horror properties, mystery, and comedy, producers are exploring new ways to frame superhero films in a market oversaturated with superhero films presently. But not all of these tonal experiments will connect with its core audience. Experimentation is important for an established franchise to stay fresh, but that also seems to be one of the issues here, that the experiment here isn't connecting with core fans. Third, at this point, for casual moviegoers, there are an awful lot of characters and backstories to recall to fully engage their current projects. The Marvel draws upon Captain Marvel, WandaVision, Miss Marvel, and Secret Invasion. The film Captain Marvel and the series WandaVision enjoyed a large audience, but Miss Marvel and Secret Invasion less so. At this point, the MCU doesn't have simply one ongoing plot thread, it has many to keep track of. Over on Disney Plus right now, Loki Season 2 builds upon Loki Season 1, Quantumania, and various Avengers films. And I do wonder if at this point some standalone offerings might help the MCU engage a larger post-Endgame audience. On the one hand, with the breadth of the material to follow, Marvel Studios is making films that are targeted towards superfans who are interested in following the many interconnected stories in the MCU, both on TV and the big screen. But on the other hand, the MCU films are so expensive that they require a large general audience to produce a profit. And these two desires, at least at the moment, are not working well together. Some recent Marvel projects are just a little too inside baseball to successfully appeal to a large general audience, but that large audience is necessary to make these projects financially viable. It's possible, I think, to pull off this type of ongoing multi-film cinematic universe with characters with whom there is a large cultural recognition because they have appeared for decades in film and TV projects beyond the comic books, such as Spider-Man. But it's far more difficult to pull it off with less-known characters such as Photon, who until recently only lived in the pages of the comics. And fourth, the box office model has simply changed post-COVID. Marvel films, due to their stunning action sequences that play well on the large screen, have fared better than other movie genres. But at this point, as 2023 comes to a close, the theatrical ecosystem has radically changed since pre-COVID. Theaters are relying on non-traditional properties such as Taylor Swift concert footage to stay afloat. Theaters are also looking at a forbidding winter and spring when very few new films will be released, in part due to studio work stoppages caused by the actors and writers' strikes. That is, in our current moment, post-COVID, projects arranged for the TV often have more cultural relevancy than those arranged for the big screen, though the financial model in Hollywood hasn't yet adapted to this reality, with nearly all studios still hoping that their next slate of pictures will revive the pre-COVID box office model. There have been a couple of breakthrough films, such as Barbie, Oppenheimer, and No Way Home, but overall, the robust numbers of the pre-COVID box office model haven't returned, and at this point, I think it's fairly clear that they aren't going to return in the near future either. Film and TV are important cultural productions, but those producing them, in my opinion, need to plot a course so that their projects are financially viable with a post-COVID audience. But at the box office, the worries about the Marvels are not the largest problems that Marvel Studios is presently facing. The big problem on the horizon concerns Jonathan Majors' character Kang the Conqueror, around which Marvel has constructed an interconnected plot that spans multiple theatrical movies and Disney Plus series, a problem that affects the underlying concept that defines how the studio views stories. Last March, Jonathan Majors, who plays Kang the Conqueror, was arrested for allegedly assaulting his girlfriend. Specifically, he is accused of assault, attempted assault, and aggravated harassment, which, according to prosecutors, left his victim with bruising, a cut, and a broken finger. Majors strongly denied and continues to deny these charges. But then in late October, according to the magazine Rolling Stone, Majors was also accused of what a police report described as physical assaults in London in September 2022, which would place these events during a time when Majors was working directly for Marvel, shooting Loki Season 2 at Pinewood Studios in England. Production started in June and ended in October. Metro Police in London recently explained, "Inquiries are ongoing, no arrests have been made." Marvel is a studio that refashioned Hollywood films around the concept of an ongoing cinematic universe, in which multiple films contributed to a larger plot that involved multiple sets of characters and various storylines that culminate in a standoff against a common villain. There were 21 films that slowly led up to Endgame and the standoff against Thanos. Since then, Marvel has used films and Disney Plus series to introduce new characters and create new superhero teams, with the idea that these projects would build up to a climax involving a supervillain, Kang the Conqueror, who is played by Jonathan Majors. In terms of his plotline, it began in Loki Season 1, then continued in Quantumania, and then was further developed in Loki Season 2, which focused on Kang in its conclusion. There was clearly a window, somewhere between March and August, where Marvel might have rewritten and reshot the conclusion to Loki Season 2 to minimize Kang's role in the ongoing MCU story, but with both the actors and the writers' strikes, reshoots were a contractual impossibility. The options for Marvel were simply these: move forward with existing footage or wait until after the strikes were resolved to rework the series, which would have delayed its premiere by about a year. This left Marvel with many large issues relating to Jonathan Majors and what will be a high-profile criminal case in New York later this year. In Marvel fashioning a response, I see two conflicting goals and two sets of values. First, publicly, Marvel appears to be supporting their star in that Majors has only been accused of assault and hasn't been convicted. Everyone deserves their day in court and should be considered innocent until proven guilty. But on the other hand, Marvel executives need to chart out a multi-year path that focuses on a new supervillain, which will shape the narrative direction of many interconnected films and TV series over the next few years. If Majors is convicted of assault in New York, it will become nearly impossible for Marvel, which is a company that produces largely family films, to explain his continued presence in the MCU. Also, the presence of a person convicted of domestic violence in films directed at a teen and tween audience would likely produce boycotts, which would substantially lower interest in and revenue from these pictures and would tarnish the reputation of Marvel's parent company, Disney. As Marvel projects are planned out many years in advance, Marvel executives soon need to decide on a path that will successfully move them through 2027 or 2028. For the past year, much of that planning has been focused on Jonathan Majors' character, Kang the Conqueror, leading into a fifth Avengers film, The Kang Dynasty, which is scheduled to be released in 2026, and will conclude Phase 6 of the MCU and set up Phase 7, Avengers Secret Wars, in which the previous battle with Kang will likely have dramatically reshaped the entire MCU. For the past year at least, Quantum Mania writer Jeff Loveness has been working on a script for the Kang Dynasty. Production would likely need to begin in 2024 to make that May 1st, 2026 release date. But according to Variety, Marvel Studios is somewhere between rethinking these plans entirely and setting up reasonable alternatives as a contingency plan. In September, Marvel executives met for their yearly retreat in Palm Springs to review concerns about theatrical performance this past year and to plan out future projects. One of the central topics of discussion was how to manage what appeared to be mounting legal problems for Jonathan Majors, around whom Marvel had planned out multiple film and TV projects. For a one-off project, such as a single film, a studio might simply delay that project and revisit those issues after courts provided a verdict in criminal matters. But the MCU model is different, as nearly every film and every series leads to another set of films and series. One suggestion here was to transition away from Kang the Conqueror and reposition a future Marvel event around another iconic villain, perhaps Doctor Doom, whose presence in Marvel Comics goes back to 1962 and some very early issues of the Fantastic Four. And this solution, which was discussed at the conference, would have been more possible if Loki Season 2 didn't so strongly focus on Jonathan Majors' character, especially with how the series ended. And this means that Marvel has some difficult choices ahead concerning Kang the Conqueror. I don't have any good suggestions here, but beyond the issue with Kang, one possible path forward for Marvel is a partial reimagining of the MCU model. A key project, now in redevelopment, is a reboot script for Blade, a project presently on its second script. Blade is the story of a vampire turned vampire hunter. As Blade the character already has vampire blood, he's immune to a vampire's primary attack, which makes him a uniquely effective vampire hunter. In the comics, he's worked at times with characters now familiar in the MCU, particularly Doctor Strange, with whom he's battled supernatural creatures. But there's a possibility here in this project to create a discrete story that isn't deeply reliant on other MCU plots. That is, a story that new audiences can see without having to follow previous films. And beyond this, there's at least a rumor in Hollywood that Marvel is trying to make this film for around $100 million, which suggests that this film would focus on characters and storytelling more than on stunts and special effects. And this type of project, at least for now, until superhero fatigue leaves us, might be a more successful path forward for the MCU rather than trying to duplicate the phenomenal and unique success of the early Marvel films that smartly led to a multi-film showdown between the Avengers and Thanos. We spent a lot of time last month with our walkthrough of Disney World, and in a couple of weeks we'll take a look at Jollywood Nights and other new offerings out in Florida. So I want to spend some time today focused on the California resort in this update. Again, I'm recording this episode on November 10th, which is also the day that the Adventureland Treehouse opens, so we're going to have to loop back to that new attraction and catch it in a few days. Let's begin here with Fantasmic. 6 months after the fire, Disney has announced that Fantasmic will return on Wednesday, May 24th, which is the lead-in to Memorial Day weekend and the start of summer. The massive animatronic dragon won't return on that date. Instead, the park is structuring a new conclusion for the show with an alternate set of special effects. But Disney has also indicated that the dragon, at least in some form, will return at a future date, though exactly when and exactly what type of dragon they will use hasn't been revealed. Next, one of the unique traditions of Disneyland compared to those of Disney World is that groups of regulars bring in full binders of pins and then set up their own trading areas on benches. This often happens on the benches just inside of Frontierland. Essentially, guests treat Disneyland as a locals park far more than a tourist destination. Some locals for a while now have brought in multiple binders and have created rather large display areas on those benches and also on nearby tables. This practice has lasted far longer than I would have guessed, as Disney typically likes to control group activities inside the parks. But as of November, those pin books can now only be displayed on designated tables, also near the entrance to Frontierland, but also off to the side, leaving the benches and other areas open to guests. Beyond this in our walkthrough of Disneyland this month, I want to focus on additions and changes to the resort. So, out in Toontown for over a week now, holiday decorations have been up, long lines of garland and silver globes across the curved roofline of Mickey's house. The yard has a Christmas tree, as does Minnie's yard. The entrance to Cartoon Spin has its own oversized wreath fixed above the entrance, and the slanting blue lampposts that line the land are each outfitted with a cranberry bow. But the holiday decorations aren't going exactly as planned as earlier this year. Just months after this reimagined land's reopening, large sections remain closed off for repairs. Goofy's house is still behind tall powder blue construction walls, and his play yard, along with the adjacent park, is behind green landscaping scrim. Above the walls, you can still see the slanted peak of Goofy's house, along with scaffolding around the roof, as the entire area is being worked on. Likewise, a set of powder blue walls and green scrim surround Centennial Fountain, the centerpiece icon for the reimagined land. The fountain is still there, and above those walls, you can still see Mickey at the top of the fountain lifting Minnie like a ballerina, but this area too is presently closed off. The original plan was to redo the recently redone Toontown section by section, with various play areas closed each for 1 month. But clearly, it's taking longer than anticipated for some of these areas to reopen. As we've discussed in previous updates, this is the first time that Disney has created an actual city-like park area inside of one of its American theme parks. Essentially, long open green spaces with trees and play areas. To make the area accessible and safe, Disney used padding, artificial turf, and in the water play area, rubber flooring, all of which did not survive the massive crowds that quickly descended on the land when it opened. The interactive water play features of the fountain also need some work now. The fixes to the recently opened land started in June, but by October some of those areas previously fixed now needed to be repaired again. Most of the repairs are for high-touch areas, such as the padded artificial roots that surround actual trees, roots that kids and families use and are intended to be used as benches and play structures. Many of the play elements in Goofy's How to Play yard have broken with repeated use, and even though the land is less than a year old, now need to be replaced. And the water play area around Donald's boat never fully opened. Work is still continuing there. But beneath all this, there's an interesting experiment. For years, Disney has insisted that guests at Disneyland imagine themselves as tourists, even if they happen to live just around the corner, with their focus being on rides, shows, and other elements that interest infrequent visitors to the park. But in terms of the park's modern use, Disneyland, like Epcot out in Florida, has a large number of guests who view it as a locals meeting space and as a regular play area for their kids. And though Disney essentially has encouraged the use of its park as a tourist destination for years, the retheming of Toontown now represents a meaningful change in the park's identity, with sections being remade for how some locals would like to use it. Only these additions were more popular than Disney had projected. Even on weekdays, at least before dark, Toontown is a crowd of families, people moving shoulder to shoulder, even when other areas of the park, such as Tomorrowland, have open walkways. The heightened use of the land as a children's play area or a type of children's interactive museum themed to Disney characters will almost surely mean that other areas of the resort will be keyed toward this type of family space in the coming years. But at least with Toontown, its success, or perhaps its overuse, has meant that play areas, padding, and artificial landscapes wore out far more quickly than anticipated. And the materials used for replacement, no doubt, will be more durable than those originally installed. Over in New Orleans Square, Tiana's Palace, the park's newest restaurant, continues to do very good business, with a line out into the walkway most hours. The restaurant is listed as quick service, but it's actually somewhere between quick service and table service. As at the Plaza Inn, over at the Hub, you move through a line with a tray as your food is plated up cafeteria style. You receive metal silverware, not the typical plastic silverware found at most quick service locations. You do take the meal to your table yourself, but there is a bus staff to clear dishes and otherwise take care of you. The restaurant is a reimagining of the French market. The architectural outline of the kitchen building now sports twin smokestacks, like those on a steam-powered riverboat, and there's a balcony where Tiana occasionally appears. But the seating area around shade trees is much like it was for the French market. The atmosphere here is absolutely lovely. The restaurant has two areas, essentially, the indoor kitchen and service area and the outdoor patio. The indoor area is deeply themed to Princess and the Frog. On the wall are letters written to Tiana from fictitious guests who have presumably enjoyed their time there. There's a painting of Tiana as a girl with her father, the neighborhood chef. The room is dressed with the motif of lily pads and frogs. Lily pad designs are worked into the stained glass lamps and into stenciled images across the ceiling. You'll find frog figures on various shelves. Beyond this, the restaurant is dressed with the cooking tools of the early 20th century. Iron pans, cornbread molds, and brass skillets, as well as Prince of New Orleans, that is the real one, not the one in Disneyland. One of the nicest touches here is a display of the bass drum from the band The Firefly 5 plus Lou, which was featured in the animated film. The serving area also features boxes of beignet mix from Café du Monde in Louisiana, which is famous for its coffee and beignets. And the entire kitchen is beneath lines of white lights that hint of a Mardi Gras celebration. With this, the kitchen and service area present many elements from the movie, even if the building itself is meaningfully different than Tiana's restaurant as featured at the end of the film. The food has its strengths. The largest limitation in Disneyland is that the park was simply not developed with space for complex kitchens. Most of the menu items are between $15 and $20, almost the exact price range of the Plaza Inn. The three best dishes, in my opinion, are the gumbo, which comes either with meat or as a vegetarian offering, the Cajun spiced chicken, and the baked mac and cheese. If you keep to these three, you should be in good shape, though I will admit that the seasoning on the chicken was slightly off for a Cajun dish, and the gumbo needed more rice to balance out the roux. I was excited to see boxes of Café du Monde beignet mix, which produces lovely beignets, but the only beignets here are filled with a lemon custard and are extremely sweet. I, as you might have guessed, prefer the originals. And just so you know, there's still some original beignets right around the corner at the Julep window, just not inside Tiana's Palace. But all of these are minor quibbles, especially as it's a counter-service restaurant. In terms of counter-service restaurants in Disneyland, Tiana's Palace is significantly better than Hungry Bear or Alien Pizza Planet. But at an average of $18 per entree, you could go to a modest table service restaurant for just a couple dollars more. At the top of my list of modest table service restaurants in Disneyland are Carnation Cafe and Cafe Orleans. I'd place the food at both of these as significantly better than that of Tiana's Palace. And for double the price, you can also visit the Jazz Kitchen in downtown Disney for Cajun food with more compelling flavors. But in terms of a good counter service location with an exceptional seating area inside the park, Tiana's Palace is absolutely lovely. The last new offering I want to touch on at Disneyland is the Palm Breeze Bar over at the DVC Villas that recently opened as part of the Disneyland Hotel complex. I was there during soft opening, so not everything was up and going yet, but the space was finished and drinks were flowing. The Palm Breeze Bar is part of the new DVC Tower, and though it's in a DVC Tower, it appears that anyone can access the bar, though I did notice that the bar area had doors and Magic Band readers, so that if at some future point management wanted to restrict it to those staying in the villas, they could do so easily. The atmosphere there is superb, as it combines two Disney traditions. The overall design is reminiscent of mid-century pool bars found in Palm Springs, where at different times Walt had two houses for his family and a third that was used as a wed gathering location. The bar here is decorated with tones of turquoise and dusty rose, lines of umbrellas, lounge chairs, high-top tables, and a few palm trees. Designers have done an excellent job of evoking the feel of the 1960s when Walt regularly vacationed in Palm Springs. In addition, background art throughout the bar area is inspired by one of Walt's favorite designers, Mary Blair. These are not reproductions of Blair's work, but rather new paintings that feature images of Disney icons, such as the castle and the monorail, that have the whimsical, flat feel of Blair's work. Her work draws upon advertising design of the 1950s and 1960s, fused with a flat presentation related to the craft movement, images that are often filled with childhood wonder. Images in her style fill the bar. If you're more familiar with Disney World than Disneyland, you should know that this DVC property is very different than those in Florida. Most of the DVC properties in Florida are large, even sprawling, such as Saratoga Springs and the Copper Creek and Boulder Ridge areas at Wilderness Lodge. The DVC villas at the Disneyland Hotel, which are just a single tower, are far smaller than any similar offering in Florida, even Bay Lake Tower. So the feel of this mid-century inspired pool bar is intimate and quaint, probably very close to the feel of hotel pool bars that Walt might have visited while he was in Palm Springs. In short, this is a fabulous environment for an evening drink after a day in the park, a place very much worth seeking out. And with that, we've worked our way through the resort, at least for this month. But already, I'm starting to piece together some reviews of other offerings that we'll explore in the near future, probably in a couple of weeks. So today, we talked about the streaming service, a timeline for improvements to the American parks, the buzz for the movie Wish, problems at Marvel, particularly around the character Kang, and new additions for the Disneyland Resort. And with this, you are now all caught up for another month. I'll be back next week when I post up our Thanksgiving episode to help get all of us in the mood for the coming holidays. We're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast. We do just two things: deep dives on stories related to the history of the Disney studio and the parks, and news and analysis of current events as they relate to the Disney company. We are funded entirely by listener contributions, by listeners who sign up to become monthly Bandcamp subscribers. On Bandcamp, you'll find over 200 episodes not available on iTunes or anywhere else. But the best reason to join is to support the work we do here and to make sure that this podcast continues to exist. You can become a monthly subscriber at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I'll also leave a link down in the show notes. So, until next Sunday, this is Todd James Pierce.